The auction nobody cared about the market was loud, filled with shouts, arguments, and the smell of dust and sweat. Bright banners hung above stalls, each one selling something: weapons, tools, strange alien food, and most of all, people. Slaves stood in long lines, chained together, their collars blinking with control lights. Some were tall and strong, their muscles shining under the sun. Others were beautiful, dressed in fine clothes to show their value. Merchants shouted prices, trying to tempt buyers with promises of strength, beauty, or rare skills. In the middle of all this noise, in a dark corner of the auction platform, sat a small alien girl. Her knees were pulled up to her chest, her thin arms wrapped around them, her head hung low, long hair hiding most of her face. The metal collar on her neck was old, scratched, and dented. She didn't speak, didn't move, didn't even look up when people passed by. Whispers moved through the crowd. "That one's broken," a man said, shaking his head. "She's useless," another merchant muttered. "Not worth even a scrap of credit," a woman laughed. Some people didn't even bother looking at her twice. She was not strong, not beautiful in the way buyers wanted, and not skilled enough to be valuable. In their eyes, she was nothing. The auctioneer, a tall alien with sharp teeth, tried to bring attention to her. "Next up." He shouted, pulling her forward by the collar. She stumbled, but did not resist, her bare feet scraping the dusty floor. "This one can still work," the auctioneer said, forcing a fake smile. "A little quiet, but quiet ones are easy to control." No one answered. The crowd shifted, losing interest before the bidding even began. The auctioneer's smile faded. "Come now, who will give me 10 credits? He called. Silence. 5 credits. Laughter rolled through the crowd. One man shouted, "I'll take her for 1 credit, just to clean my floor." And the crowd roared with cruel amusement. The girl did not react, her face hidden, her body still like a statue. In the back of the crowd, a human stood watching. Captain Elias was not dressed like the others. No fine robes, no traitors. Jewelry, just a simple jacket, worn boots, and a sharp gaze. He had come to the market looking for parts for his ship, not a slave, but for some reason. His eyes kept drifting back to the small figure in the corner. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the way she didn't look at anyone, or the way her thin shoulders seemed to carry more weight than her small frame could bear. The auctioneer sighed loudly. "All right, fine, starting at 1 credit. Anyone?" A few hands went up lazily. 2 credits. The same buyers laughed, enjoying the joke more than the purchase. It was clear they were only bidding to make fun, not because they wanted her. Elias looked closer. He saw the way her wrists were scarred, the way she kept her breathing slow, almost as if afraid to be noticed. He had seen this before. The look of someone who had learned that speaking or moving could get them hurt. Something in him tightened. Without thinking too hard, he raised his hand. The crowd turned, surprised. "A human?" 3 credits, Elias said, his voice calm. The auctioneer's eyes lit up finally. Someone serious. 3 credits. "Do I hear 4?" No one answered. The crowd had lost interest now that someone was actually willing to buy her. Sold. The auctioneer barked, pulling the girl toward the edge of the stage. The chain on her collar rattled as he pushed her into Eliza's hands. "There you go, human," the auctioneer said with a smirk. "Enjoy your broken toy." The crowd chuckled, some shaking their heads, others muttering about soft-hearted humans. Elias didn't answer. He took the girl's arm gently, surprised by how light she was. She didn't resist, didn't even look at him, but then, just as they stepped away from the stage, she spoke for the first time, her voice so soft, he almost missed it. "Why?" Elias slowed, looking down at her. Her eyes, partly hidden by messy hair, were dull, almost lifeless. It wasn't the question itself that struck him. It was the way she asked it. Not curious, not hopeful. Just confused, as if the idea of someone choosing her made no sense. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he guided her through the market. Ignoring the stares and whispers that followed them, he had no plan, no clear reason for what he'd done. But deep inside, a thought had already formed. He didn't believe in broken people, and he was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, this girl wasn't broken at all. Asterisk, the lowest price ever. The market noise faded behind them as Elias walked away from the auction stage. The girl followed because he was holding the chain that still connected to her collar, but she didn't pull away or try to escape. Her bare feet made almost no sound on the dusty ground. Elias could feel the weight of eyes on his back. Traders, guards, and curious strangers watching the strange sight of a human buying what everyone else had rejected. They reached a quieter alley between two rows of stalls. Elias stopped and knelt slightly so he could be at her eye level. She kept her head low, hair falling like a curtain over her face. He spoke softly. "What's your name?" No answer. He tried again. "Do you understand me?" A small nod. "Then tell me your name," he said, his voice still calm. She hesitated, then shook her head slowly. Elias realized she wasn't refusing. She simply didn't want to say it. The chain in his hand felt heavy. He looked at the metal collar. It was crude, dented, and clearly old. It was a prison she had worn for a long time. He unclipped the chain, letting it fall to the ground. She flinched at the sound, her shoulders tightening as if she expected him to strike her. But Elias only said, "You're not my prisoner." Her head lifted just enough for him to see her eyes, gray, dull, and filled with something close to disbelief. They reached his small cargo ship, parked at the edge of the market. Inside, the air smelled cleaner, cooler, free of dust. Elias motioned for her to sit on a bench near the table. She obeyed without a word from a small storage unit. He took out a sealed pack of food and a bottle of water. He placed them in front of her and stepped back. For a long moment, she didn't touch anything. Then, slowly, she reached for the water, her hands shaking slightly. She opened it and drank. In small sips, as if she was afraid it might be taken away. When she picked up the food, she didn't tear into it like someone starving. Instead, she ate carefully, chewing slowly, watching him from under her hair. Elias noticed the faint blue marks on her wrists where shackles had once been. There were thin scars too, crisscrossing like faded lines of pain. "You've been through hell," he murmured under his breath. She didn't answer, but her hand paused for just a moment, as if she had heard. Elias leaned against the wall, arms folded. He was starting to realize something. The reason no one wanted her wasn't because she was truly broken. It was because they didn't see her as worth fixing. "Do you want to stay here?" he asked after a while. Her chewing slowed. She looked up for the first time, her gaze meeting his. Her eyes searched his face like she was trying to figure out if the question was a trick. Finally, she whispered, "Why?" Again, Elias gave a faint smile, because no one should be thrown away like garbage. She stared at him for a long moment, then lowered her head again. He didn't push her for more words. He knew trust was something that had to be earned, not demanded. Outside, the sound of heavy footsteps broke the calm. Elias turned toward the ramp and saw two alien traders walking past, talking loudly. "That human actually bought her," one said, laughing. "3 credits, lowest price I've seen in years." The other replied. They kept walking, but their words stayed in the air like a shadow. The girl froze, mid-bite, her hands tightening on the food. Her body language told him she had heard every word. Elias crouched beside her again, speaking quietly so only she could hear. "They think you were cheap," he said, "but that doesn't matter to me." Her lips trembled slightly, not quite a smile, not quite tears, just something between. He stood and walked to the control panel, checking the ship's systems. "Rest," he told her. "We'll be leaving soon." She didn't answer. But when he glanced back, she was watching him, not with suspicion now, but with a hint of curiosity. It was small, fragile, and easily broken, but Elias knew it was. The first crack in the wall she had built around herself, and once a wall has a crack, the light can start to get in. The first meal, the hum of the ship's engine, was the only sound in the cabin. Elias sat in the pilot's seat, running his hand over the worn controls. Beside him, the small alien girl sat stiffly on the bench, still clutching the empty food wrapper from earlier. She hadn't moved much since she finished eating. As if she was afraid to take up too much space, Elias kept glancing at her. Her eyes were no longer on the floor, they were on the window. Through it, the alien city stretched far below. Lights flickering under the setting twin suns. She watched them without expression, but he could tell she wasn't really seeing the view. She was somewhere else in her mind. He finally broke the silence. Hungry again? He asked. Her head turned slowly, and she hesitated before giving the smallest nod. Elias pushed a few buttons, and the smell of heated food filled the cabin. It wasn't much, just a warm stew with bread, but it was fresh and real. He placed it in front of her. "Eat," he said simply. She reached for the bread first. Her fingers brushed his hand for a second, and she flinched like she'd touched fire. But he didn't move away. "Easy," he said softly. "No one's going to take it from you." Her hands trembled as she tore the bread into small pieces and dipped them into the stew. She ate slowly again, savoring each bite like it was the first meal she had ever enjoyed. Elias leaned back in his chair, watching her. Every movement she made told him something. She kept glancing at the door, like she expected someone to burst in and drag her away. She didn't slouch, didn't rest her back against the seat, always staying ready to move. This wasn't just shyness. This was survival. "You've been like this for a long time, haven't you?" he said quietly. She didn't answer, but her chewing slowed for a moment. Then, without looking at him, she asked, "Why do you care?" Elias smiled faintly. "Because I've seen what happens when no one does." She kept eating, but now her eyes stayed on him. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was the first spark of curiosity. When she finished, Elias handed her a small cloth to wipe her hands. Instead, she hesitated, then carefully folded it and set it aside. As if afraid to dirty it, "You can use it," he said with a light chuckle. She blinked at him, then slowly wiped her fingers. It was such a small act, but to Elias, it felt like a step forward. Before he could say more, a faint beep came from the ship's sensors. Elias frowned and checked the screen. A small blip was moving toward their position, too slow to be a patrol, too steady to be random. His gut tightened. Someone was looking for them. He stood, closing the food container and setting it aside. "Stay here," he told her. Moving toward the cockpit door, her eyes followed him, her small frame tense again. She had seen that look before, the look of someone ready for trouble. Elias stepped outside the cabin and scanned the hangar. A group of armed aliens was moving between the ships, showing a hologram to nearby traders even from a distance. Elias recognized the image. It was the girl, her head lowered, the same collar still around her neck. They were hunting her. He went back inside quickly, his jaw tight. "We need to leave," he said, already powering up the ship. The girl's hands gripped the bench. "They're here," she whispered, her voice shaking. Elias nodded. "Yes. But they won't take you." She looked at him like she wanted to believe it, but years of pain made her doubt. The engines roared to life, and the ship lifted from the ground. The city lights shrank beneath them, replaced by the dark blue of the evening sky. The girl stayed silent, but her eyes didn't leave him now. Maybe she was trying to understand why he was doing this. Maybe she was wondering when he would hand her over like all the others. Elias didn't tell her everything, not yet, but in his mind, the decision was already made. Whatever her past was, it didn't matter. From now on, she wasn't going to face it alone. Asterisk, the first smile, the hum of the ship's engines, had become a steady rhythm in the background. Outside the windows, stars drifted past. Tiny sparks of light in the endless black. Elias sat in the pilot's chair, adjusting the ship's course toward a small outpost where he could get supplies without drawing too much attention. The girl sat at the work table behind him, her knees pulled up, a blanket wrapped around her thin frame. She wasn't sleeping. She rarely slept deeply, but she was calmer than before. Every so often she glanced at Elias, quickly looking away if he noticed. It was during one of these quiet moments that the ship's control panel gave a sharp beep. Elias frowned, opening a small panel beside the seat. The interior wiring was a mess, and a coolant pipe was leaking faintly. Figures, he muttered. Every time I think this ship will behave, it throws me another problem. He reached for his toolkit, but a small shadow moved in the corner of his vision. The girl had quietly left her seat and was now standing beside him. Without asking, she crouched down and reached for the toolbox. Her hands were thin but steady, and she passed him the exact wrench he needed without him saying a word. Elias raised an eyebrow. "You know your tools." She gave a small nod, still not meeting his eyes. "Worked before," she murmured, her voice low. He didn't push her for details, just gave a quiet thank you, and went back to work. They spent the next few minutes in silence. He worked on the pipe while she handed him whatever he needed. It was simple teamwork. But it felt different, like the first brick in a bridge between them. When the repair was done, Elias wiped his hands and looked at her. "You're good at this," he said. She froze for a moment, then gave a tiny shrug. He could see she wasn't used to praise. Maybe she'd never heard it before. "Guess that means you're not as broken as they said," he added lightly. For a moment, her lips twitched, the smallest movement. But it was there. Not a full smile, but the ghost of one. Elias leaned back, a faint warmth in his chest. He didn't comment on it, afraid she might retreat if he did. Instead, he moved to the small kitchen unit, taking out a piece of fruit. Round, orange, with a sweet smell. He placed it on the table in front of her. "Go on," he said. "It's yours." She hesitated, looking from the fruit to him. Her fingers brushed over its smooth skin, but she didn't eat it right away. Instead, she held it carefully, like it was something rare and precious. Finally, she took a small bite, and the juice dripped down her chin. Elias handed her a cloth, and this time she took it without hesitation. That was when it happened, the first real smile. It was small, shy, and quick, but it reached her eyes. For just a heartbeat, the dull gray was gone, replaced by something softer. Elias didn't say anything. He just stored that image in his mind. The moment was broken by a soft ping from the ship's sensors. Elias checked the screen and saw a faint signal, a ship following them at a distance, too far to be sure of its identity, but close enough to keep him on edge. He glanced at the girl, who was still focused on her fruit, unaware. For now, he decided not to tell her if it was nothing. There was no point in worrying her. But his instincts told him it wasn't nothing. Later, when she curled up on the bench to rest, Elias quietly increased their speed and changed course. The other ship adjusted to, matching his move. He knew then someone was tracking them. He didn't know if it was the slavers from the market or someone else. But he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let them take her. As he sat in the pilot's seat, he looked back at the sleeping girl. Her face was softer now, her breathing steady. That tiny smile she had given him earlier stayed in his mind like a promise. He didn't know why yet, but protecting her felt more important than anything else, and he had no intention of breaking that promise. The stars outside the cockpit looked calm, but Elias's gut told a different story. The shadow following their ship had not disappeared. Every time he changed course, the other vessel matched his move, keeping the same steady distance. It was patient to patient, and patience in space usually meant danger. He hadn't told the girl yet. She was sitting at the work table, quietly mending a torn piece of cloth she'd found in the storage bay. Her fingers worked with surprising skill, pulling each stitch tight and neat. She looked calmer now than she had in the market. But Elias knew it wouldn't last once she learned what was out there. A faint alert pinged from the sensor panel. The ship following them was closing the gap. Elias swore under his breath. His hands tightening on the controls, he slowed their speed slightly, just enough to make it seem like he hadn't noticed. The girl looked up, sensing his change in energy. "What is it?" she asked, her voice quiet. Elias considered lying, telling her it was just a routine patrol, but something in her gaze made him stop. She had been lied to enough in her life. "Someone's following us," he said plainly, her shoulders tensed, the needle in her hands stilling. They'll take me back," she whispered, the words trembling. "Not if I can help it," Elias said firmly. Meeting her eyes, before she could answer, a sharp burst of static came through the comm system. Then a voice, cold, deep, and familiar. "Human vessel, power down your engines and prepare to be boarded." Elisa's jaw tightened. It was one of the slavers from the market. The girl's breath quickened. She stood, backing away from the table, as if she expected them to burst through the walls at any moment. Elias stepped between her and the door. "They're not setting foot on this ship," he told her. The voice came again, louder this time. "You have property that belongs to us. Hand her over, and we'll let you go free." Elias leaned toward the comm, pressing the button with slow, deliberate calm. "She's not property," he said, his voice steady, "and she's not yours." There was a pause, then laughter crackled. Through the speakers, "Do you really think you can keep her? She's worthless to you. She can't work. She can't fight. She can't even—" Elias cut the transmission before the slaver could finish. He turned back to the girl, who was staring at him like she couldn't believe what she'd heard. "You told them no," she said softly. "I don't make deals with thieves," he replied. The other ship was closing in fast now. Elias hit a sequence of buttons, rerouting extra power to the engines. "Sit down and strap in," he told her. "It's going to get rough." She obeyed without argument, buckling herself in while keeping her eyes on him, even in her fear. There was something new there. The smallest flicker of trust, the slaver ship's weapons locked onto them. A red warning light flashed across the console. Elias pushed the thrusters hard, and the ship surged forward. The stars blurred past, but the slaver vessel stayed close behind. "They're faster than I thought," Elias muttered, scanning the nav screen for options. A dense asteroid field appeared on the map. Not far ahead, it was dangerous, but it might be their only chance. He angled the ship toward it. The girl gripped the armrests, her knuckles pale. "They'll kill us in there," she whispered. "They'll definitely take you if we stay out." "Here," Elias said, not looking away from the controls. They plunged into the asteroid field, the ship weaving through massive chunks of rock that spun slowly in the void. The slaver ship followed, but with less precision. Every turn Elias took forced them to adjust, slowing them slightly. A narrow gap appeared ahead, barely wide enough for his ship. "Hold on," he warned, pushing the thrusters to maximum. The ship shot through, scraping the edges but making it. Behind them, the slaver ship tried to follow, but a smaller asteroid slammed into its side, sending it spinning away. Elias didn't wait to see the damage. He kept flying until the asteroid field was far behind them. Only then did he slow the engines and turn to look at the girl. She was breathing fast, eyes wide. "We're safe for now," he said. She didn't answer right away. She just looked at him, her lips parting like she wanted to speak, but didn't know how. Finally, she said, No one's ever done that for me before. Elias gave a small smile. Get used to it, asterisk, the stand the asteroid field was behind them. But Elias knew it was only a matter of time before the slavers returned. People like that didn't give up, not when they believed something belonged to them. He kept the ship moving toward a quiet refueling station on the edge of a trade route. Hoping to disappear among the traffic, the girl sat on the bench, still. Wrapped in her blanket, her eyes followed his every move. Since the chase, she hadn't asked where they were going or why. She was simply watching, as if studying how he reacted to danger. For a few hours, the journey was calm. The hum of the engines and the quiet tapping of controls were the only sounds. But as they approached the station, the calm shattered. A shadow fell across the cockpit as a massive ship dropped out of warp in front of them. It was the slavers. Elias's stomach sank. They had found him faster than he expected, and this time they weren't hiding their intentions. A booming voice came over the comm. Last chance, human. Hand over the girl, and you leave alive. Elias didn't respond right away. His eyes locked on the approaching ship. The girl's hands tightened on the edge of the bench. Her voice was barely a whisper. You can give me to them. You don't have to, Elias turned sharply, his voice firm. Stop. I am not handing you over. Something in his tone silenced her. She stared at him, stunned. No one had ever said that for her before. The slaver ship fired a warning shot. A beam of energy that passed close enough to make the cockpit glow. Elias's ship rattled from the shockwave. He grabbed the comm, pressing the button. You think I'm afraid of you? His voice was cold. You came for her. You'll have to go through me first, the slavers laughed. But there was a hint of annoyance in it. You're protecting damaged goods, human. She's worth nothing. Elise's jaw tightened. She's worth more than your entire crew. He said, cutting the transmission. The girl's eyes widened. She wasn't used to hearing words like that, especially not spoken with such certainty. The slaver ship moved closer, weapons armed. Elias didn't run this time. Instead, he powered down his thrusters just enough to make it seem like he was surrendering. The slaver vessel slowed, preparing to latch onto them. Then Elias made his move with one swift motion. He diverted all remaining power to the forward shields and main cannons. The ship roared to life, firing directly at the slavers' docking bay before they could connect. The blast wasn't enough to destroy them, but it forced them to pull back. The comm crackled again, full of angry shouting. You'll regret this, human. Will Elias cut them off? You already regret it, he muttered under his breath. The slavers fired in retaliation, energy bolts slamming against the shields. The ship rocked violently. But Elias kept his focus, weaving through there. Fire. The girl clung to the bench, her heart pounding. Every move he made seemed impossible, like he was always one step ahead of their aim. Finally, Elias brought the ship into the shadow of a nearby moon. The slavers followed, but the moon's magnetic storms scrambled their targeting systems. Elias used the chaos to slip around behind them, locking onto their engines. One last shot, precise and clean, tore through the slavers' propulsion. Their ship went dead in space, drifting powerless. Elias didn't finish them. He didn't need to. They weren't going anywhere for a long time. The girl stared at him, her breathing shaky. You could have killed them, she said. I don't need to kill them to win, Elias replied, his tone calm but firm. And I don't need to be a monster to protect you. Her eyes softened, and this time, it wasn't just surprise. It was something else, something fragile but real. Trust. She leaned forward slightly, her voice barely a whisper. Why me? Elias met her gaze, because someone should have seen your worth a long time ago. She didn't answer, but her fingers loosened from the blanket. The fear in her posture began to fade, replaced by something warmer. For the first time, she didn't sit as far from him as possible outside. The slaver ship drifted in silence as Elias's vessel slipped back into open space. The fight was over for now, but he knew it wouldn't be the last time they came for her. He didn't care. He had made his stand, and he'd make it again if he had to. The true worth of stars stretched endlessly ahead as Elias's ship drifted through quiet space. The hum of the engines was steady again, the danger of the slavers far behind, at least for now. Inside, the tension that had filled the cabin for days was slowly melting away, replaced by something softer. The girl sat at the work table, her thin fingers running along the smooth surface as if she'd never been allowed to just sit. The blanket she'd once clutched so tightly now lay folded neatly beside her. Her eyes weren't as dull anymore. They still held shadows, but there was light there too, faint but growing. Elias brought over 2 mugs of warm tea and sat one in front of her. She looked at it, hesitated, then gave a small nod of thanks before taking it in both hands. The steam rose between them. Carrying a quiet peace, they sat in silence for a while, just sipping. No chains, no threats, no shouting. Voices finally. She spoke, her voice soft but clearer than before. "My name is Lyra." Elias looked up, surprised. She had never given him her name before. "Lyra," he repeated, letting the sound settle. "It suits you." Her lips twitched into the smallest smile. "It's the only thing I kept when they took everything else." He nodded, understanding more than he let on. "Then it's yours to keep," he said. "No one will take it from you while you're with me." Her eyes searched his face, looking for any sign of false promise, but found none. A long silence followed, and then she asked, "Why? Why didn't you leave me? Everyone else did." Elias leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "Because you're not broken," he said simply. "They only called you that so they could throw you away without feeling guilty. But I've seen you. You're clever, strong, and you've survived more than most people ever could." Her hands tightened around the mug. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Not as a thing, not as a problem, but as a person. She blinked a few times, trying to stop the tears from falling, but one slipped free anyway. Elias pretended not to notice, giving her the space to wipe it away herself. A small alarm on the console beeped. Not danger, just a proximity alert. They were nearing a small trade outpost. It's a kind of place where no one asked questions. Elias set the ship on approach and stood. "Come on," he said. "You've been stuck inside too long. Let's get you something to wear that isn't a rag." She hesitated, then followed him down the ramp when they landed. The station was busy, with traders and travelers moving through narrow walkways between shops. Lyra stayed close to him, her eyes darting nervously at the crowds. But Elias kept his pace steady, his presence a quiet shield between her and the world. In a small clothing stall, he let her pick for herself. At first, she reached for the plainest, cheapest items. Elias shook his head. "Choose something you actually like." She froze, unused to having a choice at all. Slowly, she picked up a soft blue tunic and held it against herself. "It's nice," she murmured, almost unsure if she was allowed to say it. Elias bought it without hesitation, along with sturdy boots and a simple belt. When they returned to the ship, she changed and stood in front of him. The difference was startling. She looked healthier already, less like the scared, shivering girl he had first seen in the market for the first time. She stood without curling in on herself. "You look like someone who belongs to the stars," Elias said with a small smile, and this time, Lyra smiled back fully. No hesitation, no hiding. Later, as the ship drifted away from the station, Lyra sat in the co-pilot's seat. She glanced at him, her voice quiet but sure. If you want, I can help with repairs and navigation." Elias nodded. "I'd like that." She nodded back, her eyes holding something they hadn't before, purpose. The silence that followed wasn't the heavy kind they'd shared before. It was comfortable now, like to people who didn't need to fill the air with words to know they weren't alone. As the stars unfolded before them, Elias thought of the first time he'd seen her, head down. Body still, the whole market calling her broken. Now she sat beside him, alive in a way that made those words feel like lies carved in dust. "They called you broken," he said quietly. "But to me, you've always been worth more than they can imagine." Lyra didn't look away from the stars, but her voice carried a soft warmth when she answered, "And to me. You're the first person who ever saw me." The ship sailed on, two figures in the vast dark. No longer master and slave, not rescuer and rescued. Just two people who had found each other when the universe had already decided they shouldn't. And neither of them planned to let go.